Welcome to tonight here, another Topic of the Week video. This week I'll be talking about characters going against what they believe in, and if it should be done. This week's topic was submitted by YouTube user Allen Knox, and their topic is: when to and to not have a character commit actions against what they stand for, with 5 examples being Superman, Batman, Luke, Anakin, and Kenshin. Okay, I'm going to be perfectly honest, I don't know who Kenshin is. If this is referring to Rurouni Kenshin, I don't know anything about it. Really, I saw one episode of it like 7 years ago at this point. And I've had friends who watched it who have talked to me about a few things of it, but for the most part, my knowledge of the series, if this is what you're referring to, is null. If it's not, then if it's about something else, then I honestly don't really know many, if any, characters that are named Kenshin, so I can't really talk about that. But I will talk about the other examples. So, to do a sort of an overview of this, of writing a character doing things that are against their established beliefs, moralities, and stuff, this is going to be something very, very tricky, and it's really not something that you want to do much, because a lot of people want consistency in the characters, and it's good writing to have this consistency. You can't have a character with an established belief and established beliefs in morality, and then have them just go against it for no reason. I mean, some writers I've seen, it's obvious that they just didn't know what to do with the character, so instead of writing a story that works, and having the character react consistently and in character, they'll just change the character to whatever they want. Shoot, this character had this certain belief in morality. Oh no, they don't. This person establishes that they're a devout Christian who wants to wait until marriage. Oh no, they'll just sleep around. Why? Well, reasons. Okay, you can't do stuff like this just because. Because if you're actually writing a character that's doing something against what they believe in, you're gonna need a gosh darn good explanation. There's literally, and I'm glad Batman's on this, because there's literally a trope called Batman grabs a gun, which is describing a character that does something that's normally like totally off limits. Doing something that they normally would never do for some reason. Whether if it's because the stakes have been pushed so high, or they've been broken to the point where, they're been beaten down and there's literally no other choice. Plenty of different reasons why this sort of stuff happens. But this is usually being portrayed as something that is directly out of character and is done for very, very specific reasons. Now, to talk about Superman. Superman is a character who is seen as, in a lot of ways, a paragon. He's a Boy Scout. He's one of those fictional characters that you really aspire to be like. You look up to Superman, like he's a good, strong, moral hero who does the right thing. Now, a lot of people think that this makes him boring, and the idea of a character being moral, being boring, is something that I'm kind of tired of seeing, because it's not true. Just because there have been bad Superman stories and bad writers who have written Superman badly, doesn't mean that the character in and of himself is bad. He can do a lot with Superman, but one of the things about him is, like he talks about, the concept of the world of cardboard, where Superman is just so powerful that he has to keep himself in control, or else he can just destroy things without even thinking about it, and that's why he can't use his full power all the time. I mean, shoot, bumping into someone on the street, if he's not careful, could kill them because he's so strong. But with Superman, if you have someone like him doing something that's generally seen as out of character, you really, as a writer myself, I would generally shy away from stuff like this unless it's to make a point. A lot of times you can see characters being pushed to the brink and maybe being tempted with this, doing something awful, like just killing. Like someone like Superman or Batman, they have no kill rules. They don't kill people. Maybe they may be being pushed to considering this, and you can really sort of explore this idea. For the most part, when you're doing this, unless there's some sort of story of corruption, or it's usually something reserved, I would think, for AUs, where you have a character like Superman and Batman actually go and start killing people. It's generally not something you want to do, unless there's some very good explanation. Now, I'm not super familiar. I'm a big Batman fan, and I'm not as much on Superman. But even that, I haven't read all of the comics, so I don't know every single story or all the times when this stuff has happened. But talking about the general idea of people don't want a Superman story that's about him being just a callous killer. They don't want him being a cynical dirtbag who's willing to just let people die. People don't want to see a Superman who will just kill people. There's a reason why a lot of people didn't like Man of Steel and the portrayal of Superman in that. Especially since a lot of ways they made him broody and dark, like Batman. Yeah, that's not... There's supposed to be an ideological difference between Superman and Batman. You can't just change what Superman is just because. And having Superman kill, it's like there's a character that you can see that if they absolutely had to, they would do that. But for the most part, people don't want to see these characters break their morals. A lot of times it's seen as like, oh, edgy and cool to actually do that. And for the most part, it's just not interesting. Now, when you have Superman, people want to see him get through stuff, and maybe he'll come out with bumps and scratches. Even though he's Superman, but more so sometimes metaphorically speaking, and sometimes he can't save everyone. But they don't want to see Superman just go, all right, I'm just going to use my laser eyes to blow holes in people's brains. It's like, no, it's not what people want. Especially for a character like Superman. I think what you can do is use the temptation of doing that, the temptation that he can use all of his power to just kill anyone. But he doesn't, and that's what makes him admirable. That's what makes people love Superman. There's a reason why so many people love Superman. They don't want to see Superman just be a raging killing machine who sits in angst and goes, I'm such a killer. Especially when you already have other characters like Frank Castle, who are already dark and gritty. You don't need to change someone like Superman into being like that. There are different characters, especially with superheroes. There are all these different types of characters. And don't try to warp a character like Superman into something that's darker just because you want to see something more cynical and gritty. No one wants to go to a Superman movie and then see him just act like he walked straight out of Sin City. People want the character, and they like that character. This is one of the things I talked about. It's very difficult to write characters betraying their, own beliefs and morals. It's like, and a lot of times, and this is something advice I would give, that if you're, writing and you have a character with established morals and beliefs, and you are thinking about having them break it, really think, is this something that the character would ever really do? And is this something people would actually want to see? If you have doubt about this, if you have doubt of whether this is something you should do, you just don't do it. You just don't. You don't have the characters break and act out of character, especially if it's to fulfill a role in a plot that they're not suited for. If you bring up Frank Castle. If you have a villain, Frank Castle will kill them. If you have a villain, Superman doesn't want to kill them. You have these two different characters with distinct views, and put in the same situations, they would react differently. You don't want to replace Superman with a version of Superman that's just going to act opposite of Superman just for the sake of it. Now, alternate universe counterparts where instead of being good guys, they're villains, or different, in multiverse stuff where a character could actually have, who's a different version of them is different. That's one thing. Those are different. You can have an evil Superman from an alternate dimension. You can have Superman, a version of Superman, do bad things. Like, you can have them want to kill people and kill them to death. But in terms of just the actual characters, especially for Superman, you can play around with the temptation, and you can play around with, them having an internal conflict over it, and then, them establishing, no, they won't do it despite the temptation. You can do stuff like this and explore the internal debate on that. But I just think that just having them do it, bad idea. Now, moving on to Batman, I'm a little more familiar with Batman because I've watched I grew up watching Batman the animated series as a kid, and I've watched pretty much every Batman series that's aired, especially when I was a kid. And I've seen a lot of Batman. I love, I play the Arkham games, except for Arkham Knight. But we don't talk about Arkham Knight, especially since I had the PC version. But I'm very familiar with Batman, but even with Batman, I'm not familiar with every single comic story that he's ever been in. But with Batman, one of the things he has is that he has a very strict no-kill rule and doesn't like to use guns, ever. He doesn't use guns. The reason that the trope is called Batman grabs a gun is because the idea of Batman grabbing a gun and using it to kill someone is so radically out of character that the circumstances of that even happening are absolutely extreme. Now, yes, Batman did use guns in older appearances, but over the course of, over the course of 70 years, Batman's character has evolved, and the no-killing rule and the no-guns thing is something that has become a core part of his character for a long time at this point. Now, there have been stories that have explored the ideas of, Batman's no-kill rule. In fact, one of my favorite stories is the Batman Under the Red Hood movie, where Jason comes back and wants Batman to kill the Joker because the Joker has killed people. The Joker does bad things. He's never going to reform. He's never going to do good. He's never going to do good things. He's never going to feel repentant for any of the actions that he's done. He's never going to stop being a bad guy and getting people killed or outright killing people because he's a villain. He's a bad guy. He's so at his core bad that he'll never do something good. So why not just put a bullet in his brain and stop him right here and now? And and Batman, but it goes against Batman's rule. And the idea here is that Batman, says what stops him. It says Batman refuses to walk on that slippery slope. That if he makes an exception for his rule for the Joker, someone who is absolutely awful, then what stops him from making that exception again? Once you take that step and he kills someone, all right, then what stops him from killing someone like Two-Face, Penguin, Poison Ivy? And then you start moving down to general criminals and thugs, and it's just what stops him from just getting a machine gun and gunning them all down? Now, this is a debate that you can have, and one of the interesting conflicts between Jason and Batman is this idea of, is killing something that you can justify? Even because the Red Hood doesn't just go around gunning down innocent civilians. He just believes in lethal force against the bad guys. Except Batman doesn't. Batman doesn't want to go that far. You can the conflict is interesting because you have these two different people who have severe ideological differences in how they should approach essentially the same issue, and you can actually use that to create a story. You can have Batman be tempted to want to kill someone, but believe firmly, no, this is my beliefs. For Batman already operates in a very gray area, and so he doesn't want to just do something that the police could end up just easily going, well, he's just another killer. So what makes him different from the bad guys is he fights. I mean, apart from the fact that he's fighting the bad guys, but you can see someone like Red Hood who has done horrible things, but for good reasons, right? I mean, shoot, he's going after criminals. Sure, he's kind of a murderer, but yeah, you can it's still bad stuff. So, Batman is definitely a character, in some ways more so than Superman, but I kind of put them on the same level of they're characters that actually have, they have beliefs. And I know growing up, watching Batman the animated series, watching Batman, I always really looked up to Batman for a lot of reasons as a kid. Sometimes it was he did awesome karate and stuff, and that was inspiration for me wanting to get into martial arts. I'm not going to lie, I did get into martial arts because of Batman. Or initially, at least, when I was a kid. I did grow up a little bit by the time I actually did it, but that was my initial inspiration. And then you have Batman's, intelligence. He doesn't fight with superpowers. He uses his intelligence and his resources to fight instead of just being like Superman, who actually has these, or Wonder Woman, who have these supernatural powers. or the superhuman powers. But and then one other thing is that Batman did have a strong moral code, and it's something that I find as, I always found that appealing in his character, that he has that strong moral code. So for the most part, 99.999% of the time, you don't have a character like Batman just break his morals, even if it's in an extreme situation, because a lot of times it's just out of character. Batman grabbing a gun is supposed to be the exception. You can't have Batman grab a gun when everything gets serious. In a lot of ways, it's also far more interesting to see Batman figure out how to solve the problems without resorting to lethality. Seeing him overcome these obstacles without using a gun, without killing people, that's interesting. And it's one of those things that a lot of people love about Batman. It's one thing I really like about Batman. And I don't want to see a story where Batman just decides that, screw it, I'm just going to kill people. Well, and especially when the Red Hood basically already fills that sort of character. The Red Hood being the former Robin, and having been trained by Bruce. Jason already has that, I'm basically Batman, but I use guns. Now, if I remember correctly, I think during the whole battle for the cowl thing where everyone was trying to figure out who would be Batman, I think Jason did dress up as Batman, but with guns. I'll have to look that up again, but I do think I remember that. So it's like you already really have a character that fulfills that. So what's the point of having Batman do this? I mean, it should be the situation that happens once in a lifetime. It's the once in a lifetime exception. You don't just have a character do that, and that's what I talked about before. You can't just have a character go against what they believe and all of their established moralities just because you want to fulfill a story, and instead of doing something that makes sense, you have a character act in ways that is contrary to how they normally act for the sole sake of fulfilling a plot you didn't even think that hard about, and think of maybe we shouldn't have this character change for the sole sake of making it happen. But yeah, I mean, those are characters that, a lot of times they represent something a bit more than being just heroes. Like, a lot of times there are things that you can look up to. And Batman particularly was a source of inspiration for me as a kid. So, to see him, this is why things like in Batman v Superman, where Batman is just totally cool with killing people and being brutally violent, and, and having him just, oh, hey, look, he blew up a van. That's why stuff like that pisses me off, because Batman is a character that I really adore. And even seeing movies, I believe it's the original Tim Burton Batman movie. The one with the Joker in 1989, I believe. Yeah. Where, people die because of Batman and be like, no. I mean, shoot, there are situations where I could see it in different versions of the character. Like in the Nolan version. The idea that this Bruce, this one that's a bit more grounded than the comic book or cartoon, Batman, won't save Ra's al Ghul, but he's not going to directly kill him. Yeah, it's a bit of warping the idea, but then when you have him go and save the Joker, who I would consider worse than Ra's al Ghul, because Ra's al Ghul at least has some sort of decent rationality for what he's doing. Oh, I'm sorry, Ra's al Ghul, but. That's inconsistent with the established character. And honestly, with the way they build up that version of Batman, it's a little hard for me to believe that he would go out of his way to save the Joker. But that's an alternate version. That's a different take. That's what I talked about with having different AUs and different alternate interpretations and alternate universes. But when you talk about the main versions of the character, I don't see Batman ever doing it. Really, but for alternate versions like the Nolan Batman, I can see them reacting a little differently. But yeah, when you have a different character built in a different way, I can see them not adhering to all that stuff specifically. But again, like I said, this is alternate interpretations. If we're talking about like main universe Batman or just general appearances of Batman, yeah, you may want to stick to the established character instead of just doing whatever you want. And this is why the idea of some stories where Bruce just is totally cool with killing, or just basically is like, well, screw everything, like Like, I'm not a big fan of stories like, what was it, The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller. I've never had issues with some stories of Batman written by Frank Miller. But, I just don't really like that sort of thing. And I don't want to talk too much about Batman, because I do really care about Batman as a character, and I don't want this to hog the video. Now, talking about Luke Skywalker is another one of those characters that is in some ways aspirational, but I feel like he's one that they really show weakness in. And this is one of the things that's really great to see Luke. This is one of the things that does make him inspirational, in the fact that he does face these darker sides to him, and fighting against the dark side, and overcomes it. And you can look in that and you can find inspiration in Luke Skywalker. It doesn't matter who you are or where you're from. You can look at a character like Luke Skywalker, and you can find something great in him. One of the big things because they establish him with numerous character flaws, and as the original trilogy goes on, he starts maturing and developing. He may be a little brash and maybe far too willing to jump into danger, but he does have good reasons. He cares about his friends, and he cares about his doing the right thing and helping people and fighting for the greater good, and not just doing something for selfish reasons. Like when his whole life was gone in Tatooine, his aunt and uncle were killed, and he had nothing to go back to. He wanted to train to be a Jedi. He went on to join the rebellion. He went on to fight, against the Empire, out of a sense of, he did want to do bigger things, but this is the right thing to do, and and he had to do it. And we see him go and willingly sacrifice himself to save his friends. This is one of the big things that he does in Empire Strikes Back, is when he shows that despite the fact that Yoda is telling him to stay on Dagobah, finish your training, you can't go and fight Vader, Luke goes and fights him anyway because he wants to save his friends. It's something that's considered an absolute core part of his character. He considers his family and friends super important. And the one time that he really does start to go against him, like he starts doing things that are against his own, beliefs, or things that he has openly stated of wanting to do, it's really because of also his core beliefs. At the end of Return of the Jedi, during the big fight between Luke and Vader, Luke wants to turn Vader over back to the light side. He doesn't want to kill him. He doesn't want to fight him even. He believes that he is Anakin Skywalker, his father, and he believes that there's still good, a little sliver of goodness still down in him, and that's worth trying to redeem him. And so he goes out of his, and even in Return of the Jedi, in order to keep him from being a target and putting a target on everyone else's, he separates himself and goes directly to Vader and the Emperor, and because they can track him. So that would put a bigger target on everyone else. So he goes and faces them separately so that, he doesn't. So, but at that point, when he's trying to stop Vader from fighting him, and, he has to fight back because Vader keeps fighting him. And with his friends possibly dying because of the trap that, the Emperor set, and when Luke is backed into a corner and Vader threatens Leia, his sister, this is when Luke starts getting really angry, and this is when he unleashes this righteous fury on Vader and beats him. And it's because, and I talked about this before when I was discussing this stuff with Luke. This is when he starts kind of tilting towards the dark side. That anger and that hatred is really it's taking him over, and it's very easy to fall to the dark side. But when Luke manages to pull himself back and stop and throw his lightsaber and say that I won't kill my family because I care about Vader even if he's a monstrous human being. I care about him, and that's the core part of his belief, is that he cares about his friends and his family. And he does even successfully manage to get Vader to save him through his actions, and even if it's the last minute and the one good thing that Vader has done in decades, he actually does manage to redeem Vader, showing that his morals, were right. He's a good person, and he's not just going to kill someone just because everyone else told him to. This is one of the reasons why The Last Jedi is such a piece of garbage, is when you have Luke trying to kill his own family, abandoning hope. Like, he was so hopeful, he was so optimistic, he was always willing to fight, even when he was at his rock bottom. And then you have Luke go, oh, well, you know, shoot, I tried to kill my own nephew because reasons. Oh, I had a moment of weakness, which is why I snuck into his tent and I pulled out a lightsaber and was like, time to off the bugger. No, Luke would never do that. Luke would never do that. Because if he was willing to try to redeem Darth freaking Vader, Scourge of the Galaxy, and the second most evil person, yeah, he's not going to be trying to kill his own family. Family is important to him. It's especially important after he lost his aunt and his uncle, the people who raised him. After he lost them, he lost Obi-Wan, he lost his entire life. But he still manages to pull through because, you know, it was the right thing to do, and because Luke didn't let those things stop him. So when he ends up at rock bottom again as a Master Jedi, oh well, you know, he just gives up. He wants to die. This is what I mentioned before about having a character change their established character morals and stuff just to fit a story. That's exactly what Rian Johnson did to Luke. He wanted to tell a specific story. So instead of thinking, this is out of character for Luke, I shouldn't tell this story and I should change this to something that does work, he just twisted Luke Skywalker into Jake Skywalker and crammed him into the story going, this is what story I want to tell. I don't want to use the established characters. I want to make everything happen the way I want to happen. And then just changed everything depending on what he wanted. And then you can even extend this to a lot of characters in The Last Jedi, like, hey, Poe. Poe being a war hero and someone who is deeply trusted. Nah, he's just some stupid hotshot pilot. Like, yeah, no. Even Rey, like, as bad as her character is, someone who hated Kylo Ren is all of a sudden wanting to save him? Even after he tortured her, killed a bunch of people, and even nearly killed Finn, one of her closest friends? Yeah, no. But yeah, going back to Luke, it's like those core aspects you can't just change. And I mean, if you dealt with this idea that maybe he felt the temptation of the dark side, because especially since that's already something that's been built up with his character, exploring in a story of Luke feeling the temptation of the dark side, but dealing with it, resisting it, that's something that you can actually do a lot with. Because the dark side isn't something that just goes away. There's always that temptation. You always need to remain strong. And seeing Luke especially deal with that decades later as he's an adult, you know, or not just an adult, but, you know, older and wiser, and seeing him deal with it in a more mature way and not just instantly going boom and falling towards it like he did in Return of the Jedi when fighting Vader. You know, seeing him being able to resist this in a greater way because of what he's been through is interesting. Seeing actually using those struggles of him, you know, doing those things and teaching that to his students, and even if The Last Jedi was written properly, teaching this to Rey of how to resist these dark tendencies. Because I've been through this. I know the struggle of becoming evil. I know what the dark side feels like, and I can teach you how to resist that, and I can tell you, you know, you can resist this. This isn't something you have to fall to. You know, using that to develop his character and even to help develop other characters is great, and exploring that. Not having him betray his beliefs, but actually using the times when he was almost going to do that, and the times when he was influenced by the dark side to grow his character, and to have him teach this. Do what Yoda said. Teach what you have learned, which should include stuff like this, to his students, and showing this affect a whole new generation of Jedi who learn things differently from how the previous, you know, Jedi and the old Jedi Order did, in ways that is more healthy, instead of trying to, you know, cut yourself off from those feelings, to say, I have these feelings, I acknowledge this, and I deal with them instead of trying to, and like, repress them, like what Anakin tried to do. But yeah, I mean, again, this is one of those things where this is, I say this, I've been saying this quite a bit, but you can use this to establish the development of the characters, but don't just completely have them betray their characters just because. You can use it to develop, and you can use that temptation to develop the characters and have them become stronger because of it. Now, Aang, Aang from Avatar: The Last Airbender is another good example. And obviously, his storyline was influenced heavily by Luke Skywalker's storyline. But one of the biggest things about Aang is that he's a pacifist. Now, it doesn't mean he won't fight, but he'll fight when he has to. But he's not going to kill people, and he's going to try not to do things. He's going to try to be more agile and dodge things, because especially that's the philosophy of airbending rather than something like earthbending, which is tackling things head on. You have him presented with some situations where he has to, come up with creative solutions. But the biggest one that challenged him was his final decision that he had to make in regards to Ozai. Much like in Luke dealing with Vader, where he was told that he had to kill Vader and Luke refusing, Aang was told that he had to kill Ozai. And even though Aang doesn't have any personal connection to Ozai like Luke did with Vader, it goes completely against all of what Aang believes in to kill. Aang doesn't want to kill. He's not going to do something to kill someone. And being told by, basically everyone, even his past lives, that he has to break his own morals to kill. To take a life that even if someone evil like Ozai, he doesn't want to do that. That's awful. That's terrible. That goes against everything that Aang believes in. So it's no wonder that he ended up finding a different way. And this is where the whole energy bending thing comes in, is that Aang was maintained his morals, and that even if he's going to fight the Fire Lord, that's always been the goal, is to fight Ozai. But he's not going to kill him, and in fact, the whole debending him and taking away the one thing that he had such great pride and power, that gave him all this pride and power, and having him live as just a normal person without bending, for someone like Ozai, is a fate worse than death. Which is great, and it strips him away from what gave him all that power. But, the whole point of this is that despite the fact that he's being pressured into breaking his morals, he doesn't do it. And a lot of people say, well, Aang should have just killed him. Well, no, you want a 12, 13-year-old boy to be forced to break all of the morals that he has, because the air nomads are gone. He is the last airbender. So how is he supposed to teach on his air nomad beliefs if he breaks his own beliefs? If he's willing to kill, even though it's so fundamentally against his nature and his morals, even if he is doing it for a good reason, to stop the war, I mean, that's terrible, and it would probably just wreck Aang. And especially when you have the whole storyline with Katara and the Southern Raiders wanting bloody murder to avenge her mother, but then realizing that it's not worth it, and that would have been something that destroyed Katara. In a lot of ways, I can see that killing Ozai probably would have destroyed Aang. It wouldn't make him a better character if he just tossed aside his morality to kill Ozai. It's just something that he would never do. And this is definitely one of those cases where you don't do it. You don't have them do that, because, that is so core to what Aang is. He wouldn't be Aang anymore if he did do it. But I did like the exploration and the debate of it. And then, the fact that Aang was willing to put himself on the line and his own bending on the line in order to stop Ozai non-lethally. That, especially during, Sozin Comet, when he was ultra powerful, that Aang was willing to put all of that on the line to stop Ozai in a non-lethal manner. He maintained his beliefs and his morality. That's something admirable. When all these cynical people who wanted Aang to just kill, it's like, no, okay, you missed the point. Aang's supposed to be, you're supposed to look up to Aang and say that, okay, no, he's not breaking his morals just because he's told to. There is an exploration and a debate on this, and this is why Aang goes to his past lives, but then finds himself shocked that not just Roku, who it makes sense, because Roku considers not killing Sozin a mistake, but even Yang Chen, the previous air nomad avatar, is telling him to, yeah, you gotta do stuff you don't want to do to save the world, but this for the greater good mentality can really be taken too far. I mean, avatars can make mistakes, and having them maintain strict morals can be a good thing. I mean, shoot, Kiyoshi, while she's seen as great for, doing for the stuff that she did, I mean, she was totally willing to let that one warlord guy die, even if it was in some ways incidental to her, to her actions. She also created the Dai Li, and yeah, the Dai Li basically turned into the Earth Kingdom Illuminati. So, but it's far more interesting to see Aang hold these morals, and especially when I see all these stories that are like characters becoming worse and darker and all these gritty stories, and it's like, no, we need to have stories that are positive and say, hey, yeah, you can have these beliefs and not be seen as a complete moron who's a naive idiot for not wanting to kill. I mean, certain stories, it can work to have characters kill, but in some stories it doesn't, and with Aang it really wouldn't have worked. So yeah, talking about all those characters, I stand by the statement that for the most part, in like 99% of the time, if you're gonna have characters with established, strict established, morals and beliefs, you just don't have them go against it. You can, you can actually debate the ramifications of these beliefs, like the whole thing with the Red Hood versus Batman, and Jason's, issues with the no-kill policy. You can have, this be used to develop the character, like with Luke, in that the times when he was acting, violent, this is used as part of his development on his way towards becoming a true Jedi. You can use this to actually develop the characters, but I think it's something that you sort of tease, not really tease, but you sort of, you use and you have the characters maybe come close to it, but then restraining themselves. Because it's great to see these characters go through those darkness, go through that struggle, and then manage to come out stronger and, stronger for it. Because that's admirable. And I think when people, worship stuff like The Walking Dead, it's like, well, it's nice to see stories that allow these characters to be moral and allow them to have victories without having to completely betray everything they believe in. So it's something that can be used as a writing tool, but just like pretty much any kind of trope or writing technique, there are right and wrong ways to do it, and it's something that you have to be careful with, because you don't want to write it. You don't want to push a character too far and then have them become so different from what they were that you basically alienate people who like that character in the first place and just change them for no reason other than to fulfill a story or to make some sort of edgy point. It's, for the most part, it's just not a good idea. And especially with characters like Batman, who are so adamant about their own morals that just having them break it is bad enough. And especially, and it's true, another character relating to Batman, was, this is a bit of a tangent, but it's sort of related to him, that Cassandra Cain, who is raised to be an assassin and to kill, and ends up being taken into the Bat family, and she's adamant about not doing this. She's like, she doesn't want to be that. She doesn't want to be that assassin that she was trained to be by her father. And then, you can have a storyline where she's just turned into a killer for reasons. Why? Who knows? But then you have to come up with an explanation. Oh, she was being mind controlled. And it's stuff like that that's stupid. And you just don't do that. You don't break these characters just to tell a story that didn't even need to be told in the first place. it's something that you really need to be careful with. But it's one of those. It's like characters, like killing off characters, and you know, if there's any bit of doubt of whether you should do it, you just don't, because it actually does take a good writer to manage to weave in this, you know, a character being pushed to the brink. And I've seen bad stories like this with writers who can't really handle it, and it's not good. It's not entertaining, and it's just so off-putting. Well, I think that's about it for this topic. If you want to submit a topic to me, you can comment below if you're on YouTube, or if you're on Tumblr, you can send me an ask and do topic, and then whatever topic you want me to talk about. Just make sure to follow the rules I'll be posting down below. If you want to watch last week's topic video, you can check that out here. If you want to watch next week's topic video, you can check that out here when I get that done. So if there's any characters, any other things that you have to say about characters breaking their own morality, or times when you feel it's good, or if it should just never be done, please comment below. And thank you for watching.